Hi, and welcome back to another Koi Perspective podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to say we've got our first ever guest on the podcast. We've got a few names lined up to join us on the podcast, but one of the first ones I wanted to get involved was Mr. Andy Finch. How are we doing?
All right, mate. Good.
Good stuff. And we're joined, as always, with Simon from up north, Koi Pond, and Dave from Eden, Koi Pond. How are we doing?
Joe.
Look at that, a dab for those who are not watching the video. We got a dab from Dave.
Even though he's suffering.
Yeah, I got man. Yeah, just so everyone knows, I got man flu. This isn't my usual sexy monotone voice, I know, but I got a touch of the man flu, so you're gonna have to put up with a bunged up, I'm afraid.
For those of you who don't know Andy, I've recently done a feature in the magazine with him. Andy is probably the most prominent name in the UK for koi ponds in water purification. This is for a novice perspective. When we talk about water purification, it's mainly about the tap water that you're using to either fill up your pond or tap water. So not actually filtering your koi pond, but filtering your tap water. But yeah, Andy, how are you and what's the business like at the moment for you? Because I imagine it's a very busy time with the amount of issues we're having with the water companies in this country at the minute.
It has been, but now we're getting to that cool period and people think all the fish hibernate and nothing goes wrong. It seems to quieten down, which is very, very strange. And then you'll have a few days where it's cold and then we'll get a warm weekend and then people are on the phone asking questions, putting in orders, and you think, why? It should be all year round. You've got to be looking after your fish all year round.
Yeah.
Strange.
We were talking about how 1 minute, if you are doing your water testing, 1 minute your water supply can be absolutely brilliant. And then within their logic that they have in some of the water companies, sometimes they change the water and it can come out completely different out of your tap, and it can wreak havoc in a koi pond, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is with all this, and I do it as a talk at koi clubs, testing is probably the most important thing in the koi keeper's diet. Well, not in their diary, but in their career, really. You need to test. And first off, test your tap water so you've got a base mark where to go from. Write it all down, a bit of paper. Then if anything goes wrong with your purification, and you think, hold on, how come I've got more chlorine, I've got high ammonia or whatever? It could be in your tap water. It sounds crazy, but it can be.
I think that's a good point, isn't it, Joe? As a novice, I never ever tested, when I first started out in this hobby, I never tested my tap water. You just test the pond water. And whenever you speak to an expert or someone in the know, the first thing they say is, what's your baseline? What's in your tap water?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the novice perspective is you look at your water and it's shiny clean out of the tap and you think, oh, it's clean water, isn't it? That's the number one.
I was guilty as that myself. When I first started, I just chucked hose pipe in pond.
Yeah.
No filtration on the water line or anything. To me, as a beginner, water's water.
Yeah.
To be fair, and Andy would probably cringe at this one, we did put our hoses on the spray function because we all know that chlorine evaporates, so you don't need to worry about that.
I've had this at koi clubs and say, I've just sprayed water into my pond. And then you ask a question, a customer will say, my water's crystal clear. Well, this glass of water is crystal clear. But crystal clear doesn't mean anything. Acid's crystal clear. Would you drink it? No, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's the same analogy, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I drink this tap water, what's in front of me, and it's probably one of the worst supplies of tap water in the country. In my eyes, it's hard water. It's got a taste to it, aftertaste to it. Terrible. And when we're looking at, you look at water comes out of Japan, water in Japan, and these fish are all bred in this water, and it's pure water off it's ice melt off the mountains, low TDS, pH of 7, absolutely fantastic water. And we bring it over here and we put it in all this rubbish what we've got with chlorine and metals and everything else. And then we wonder why fish are suffering.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
It's the water. It's crazy.
So, for you, what was the moment where you went from the hose pipe to actually putting like a filter on your tap water? Do you remember?
I don't think I do really remember a certain point that just made me click and just start. I think the first thing I actually did was just to stick a three-stage filter on, thinking that it's probably enough to completely eliminate everything out of the water supply. But I think that just came as I started getting further into the hobby. I heard something about that, well, tap water really needs to be filtered because of the rubbish in it.
Yeah.
But I'd not gone that far into it at that moment in time. So in my eyes, all I really needed was a little three-stage filter. And so that's what I started on with my pond, just a little three-stage filter.
Yeah.
Well, any filter's better than no filter. And like when you probably first started, and if you found any chlorine, you put sodium thiosulfite in, which would neutralise any chlorine in your pond. But then that's a bit of a sticking plaster because you should have purified it in the first place. But as long as you are doing some sort of purification, when you get to three-stage purifiers, obviously there's flow rates through three-stage purifiers as there's any other purification. And if you run it too fast, you may as well take the filters out because they're not going to do anything. It's retention time, same as your filters on your pond.
Andy, can I just ask you, you touched on flow rates through filtration systems there. Obviously, like I say, to get a good performance out of them, you need to be running them quite slowly to eliminate the chlorine and the metals and that out of the water. So in that regard, say, for example, someone that's not running it like that and somebody that just does like one big water change in one hit, then it's better to like just use something like a sodium thiosulfate.
Yeah, you'd put it in before you put the water into the pond. That's the problem where if you're going to run a three-stage purifier and you look at a 10-inch three-stage purifier, it depends where you are in the country and what chlorine levels they are because everybody's water's different. So if you're looking at a 10-inch, the maximum I'd say with a 10-inch is half a litre a minute. That's the maximum. No matter where you are in the country, that's the maximum. If you look at a 20-inch by 2.5-inch, I'd say 3/4 of a litre, 750 mils a minute. The bigger you get, the faster you can run it. And obviously there's more carbon in those things, but you still should be testing. Never, ever assume because you've got carbon in a filter and you're running water through it, it's removing chlorine because it's not forced to do. There might be a burst main down the road, they flood the main with chlorine, you're doing a water change in your pond and all of a sudden your fish start flicking and flashing. Think, what's wrong with them? Out comes the microscope, they start scraping and doing all the rest. And we've not tested the water coming out of purifier, it's still belching in the pond, fish are flicking and flashing. You do all your scrapes, and I get it, honestly, once a week at least. Somebody will ring me up, fish are flicking and flashing, can't find any parasites, what's wrong? Have you tested your water for chlorine? No. Test your water, ring me back. Oh, I've got chlorine in my pond. It's only 20 parts per billion. Yeah, that's detrimental to koi.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was gonna ask you what the typical signs are that fish are suffering from the contaminants in the tap water supply.
Right, so if you look at a fish will tell you what's going on. And mucus is the first sign of something's wrong with your water. You might get mucus on the heads. First thing people think about, parasites. Straight away, out comes a microscope, scrape. I scraped all these fish, can't find anything. Well, hang on, start again. That's test your water. You jumped one stage too far. Back to water testing. Test your water. First thing, honestly and truthfully, the first thing I get test for in my pond is chlorine. We're all busy in this day and age, and we could miss the signs of chlorine in the pond, or you've not done your filter tests or whatever. We've been on holiday, and you've been away, come back, and your carbon's exhausted. You've got a trickle in, and there's chlorine gone in the pond. And you go out and you think, some of them fish. The first test I do is chlorine. Test the chlorine.
Before we move on, Andy,
above zero is detrimental. You don't want anything in your pond. You're looking for zero.
Yeah. Before you move on, Andy, so you say about testing chlorine. What would you recommend as a test for chlorine for beginners?
The beginners thing, DPD-4 tablets. So you 10 mils of water in a little test tube, crush a DPD-4 tablet in it, and the test is instant. When we did this 10, 15 years ago, it was nonsensical, really, because this is an oxidizing test. So you're looking for a hint of pink. You're looking directly vertical through the test on a white background. Any hint of pink is chlorine. Now, when we first started doing that, 15 years ago probably, you'd have a look, and here's that pink. You're looking for pink, and here's that. So pass it to the wife. The wife has a look at it. I'm not sure if it's pink or not. So the son has a look at it. And by the time it comes back to you, this is oxidizing all the time. And if you leave it, it's gonna turn pink. And I've had customers phone me up, and that's just a basic test, but it's a test. And I've had customers phoning me up. So I've just bought a big blue from you. It's not working. What do you mean it's not working? I've got chlorine. Really? Well, that's the first I've heard. Well, how are you doing your test? DPD4. So just run me through it. How are you doing it? Put the tablet in the test tube, crush the tablet, go and make a cup of tea, feed me fish, come back, and it's pink. Well, yeah, it's an oxidizing test. You've just missed the basic test. It's straight away. So that, for me, is a basic test. I would do that. Anybody can do that. You can get tablets off eBay, as in probably 100 tablets for about 20 quid.
Yeah.
That's at least you're testing. You know, and you're looking just for a hint of pink. Now, maybe when you get a hint of pink, it's too late anyway, and your fish are suffering anyway. And then your next thing you're looking at is probably a Hannah pocket checker or a Palin test or whatever, an electronic test. But if the basic test, if people have got all pockets around the country, if you're not got very good income or whatever, at least if you test with a DPD4 tablet, they're going to last you a long time. Test once a week, at least you're testing.
Yeah. And I think they're so inexpensive as well. It's just as a once weekly check. There's a lot of people out there that will, probably test their tap water instead. I mean, there is a conversation to be had about, before we come on to like some other contaminants in pond water I want to discuss with you, but water changes. So if you're filling up your koi pond with tap water, you're going to want to make sure before you put your fish in it's got no contaminant. But if we're water changing, that's where you're going to see the chlorine come from and where you need to be checking it weekly. If you're on a trickle in, trickle out system, that's where it's going to be more prominent, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's problems with trickle in systems in different parts of the country. It's not probably best for everybody, and where they're dosing chlorine at night, these chlorine levels are massive. And so you've got an open tap there, putting a trickle into your pond. Everybody else is in bed. They're all snoring their heads off. Your fish are in the pond, and this water's going into the pond, and it's got chlorine. And it's gone through a big blue. And part of my talk, and I spoke to you about this, Joe, one customer of mine, every single Monday morning, he got chlorine in his pond. Without fail, Monday morning, no other time, Monday morning. I've been to his house and I've tested his tap water and there's no chlorine in his tap water. That's bizarre. So where's the chlorine come from? And they're dosing it at nights, at the weekends. And he got a trickle into his pond, and every single morning he got chlorine in his pond. Test the water on a Monday morning out of the big blue, and there's no chlorine coming out of it.
Yeah, bizarre, isn't it? It's really peculiar.
It is.
You've got this customer set up on a timer now, haven't you?
Yeah. So you look at like times of the day where probably chlorine levels are the greatest. You're looking 7 in the morning to about 9 breakfast time.
Yeah.
12 till about 2. And then 4 till about 7:30. And they're the times where people are using more water. And if you're unfortunate that you live in a coastal area or some sort of a theme park or anything like that, an attraction area, and you're in that area, expect higher levels of chlorine in the summertime. Because there's more people in the area and they put more chlorine in this water supply. People don't realise that. It's not the same. What you get one day, you can test your water, and I dare bet if you all test your water tomorrow and test it the following day, or test it a different time of the day, there'll be a different level of chlorine. If you've got an electronic meter, that is.
Dave, do you run a trickle in, trickle out system on your pond?
So we was talking the other day, weren't we, about overspray from the drum, but so my Saturday mornings tend to be my pond maintenance day, and I usually remove 10% in the morning and then trickle back in Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
To top it back up. Using a Big Blue, my ad. A couple of weeks ago, I became the proud owner of a Big Blue. I will stick a video out on that. Actually, Andy's given me some really good information about my water, and yeah, I've seen a huge improvement, to be honest. So very similar to what Andy was explaining there. Fish were fine, and being quite a novice, you see them flash immediately. You think, oh, get the microscope out. Then the fish are stressed anyway, and then there was net rub and damage to the koi, and it was really getting on my nerves. And where it come to a head was I couldn't get when I changed my bio over in my Nexus, I couldn't get it to colonise. I couldn't get it to a point where it was taking out the nitrite. The nitrite was coming down, sorry. Anyway, Bob, my local dealer, pond dealer, came up, and I was topping up through my Nexus, but it wasn't dechlorinated. So I was putting dechlorinator in the pond, but then running the water through the bio side. Do you imagine any bacteria I was building up in the week? I was then absolutely hammering it and killing it with chlorine at the weekend.
Yeah.
Soon as I started topping up via the pond, this was before I got the big blue, all of a sudden my media started to go brown. And yeah, just as quick as that. But yeah, could not get it to stabilise in that Nexus at all. And then, as I say, he really laughed at me, my local dealer. And he said, well, you're running chlorine in your bio. I was like, oh, it makes sense.
Yeah, but if you don't know, you don't know, do you? That's the thing. I've had customers ring me up, and bizarrely, when you look at new pond syndrome, probably it takes 5 months at most to colonise a filter. Well, I've got new pond syndrome. I've been running my pond for 18 months. 18 months, and you've got new pond syndrome. Have you checked your pond for chlorine? No. Have you got any test kit? Yeah, I've got a pocket checker. Go and test your pond for chlorine. Ring me back. I've got chlorine in my pond. Well, that's why you've got new pond syndrome, because your filters are just. And he wasn't doing a trickle in. He was doing water changes. So the filter was starting to mature through the week. Then he was doing his water change, and it was just knocking his filters back all the time. And he says, "My K1's white."
Yeah,
well, there's no bacteria on it.
I was exactly the same, and I was proud as a new pond keeper. I was looking at all these other Nexus with brown media, thinking, "Well, look how clean mine is." You know, I didn't really understand the cycle of killing off bacteria and ammonia and nitrites, etc. I just thought, my Nexus is lovely, spick and span. You know, I should be proud of myself. Live and learn.
What about you, Si? Do you have a trickle in, trickle out on your pond?
I have got a trickle in now. I did used to do water changes like 10% a week, drop the pond 10% and fill it back up. I've probably a couple of months ago or so went over onto a trickle, so it's changing 10%, very slowly over the course of the week, just to see if it sort of makes any difference, just as a bit of a test, really.
Has it made a difference?
The fish seem a lot calmer. The pond does seem a lot more stable because it's not getting that initial shocker, 10% being dropped and topped back up. And, it's not hitting the pond as hard, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, your temperature fluctuations have probably got a bit to do with that as well.
Yeah.
You put a lot of cold water in there, and it's all the contaminants in there at one go.
Yeah.
Instead of doing it over a period of time, and if you're using anything else, well, yeah, you'd be better off. But it's just as long as whatever's working for you and your fish are okay, use it.
Yeah.
You've got to get round the situation of what's in your supply, really. And if it's working, if one person's doing a 10% water change in one go, and that works for him, that's fine. If you're doing a small trickle in over a period of time and it works, I always say, why fix it if it's not broke? Just do what's best for you.
I'm a big believer in the fact that trickle in and trickle out is not needed. That being said, when
he's called you a liar there. So.
No, I think it's a viable option. And myself, I run a trickle in, trickle out. I change about 10% a week at the moment, and that's just topping up with reverse osmosis water, trickling out the 10% of the existing pond water. I do believe that there's things in the water from a trickle in, trickle out perspective. I don't think it's necessarily about ammonia, nitrite, nitrates. I think there's a lot of other things in the water as well. So one of the things I learned last year is that both male and female koi give off certain hormones in the water.
Yeah.
And they each will prevent the opposite sex from growing in the water. So the only way to dilute that is to trickle in, trickle out. I only have a 200-gallon pond. It's only really, really small, but I have fish in there that are like 70 cm and still growing now. And there's a teabagging effect if you're not water changing often enough, that I think very quickly you'll see your coils stop growing. I think that I've seen circumstances where people don't trickle in, trickle out, and they've had good growth results. So it's really not like a absolute science, but I do believe when you're getting into big fish, Sansai and above, you need to be looking at trying to dilute that water and changing it every so often. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Andy.
Well, at the end of the day, I suppose you're trying to mimic larger volume of water. And by doing what you're doing, those fish aren't in a cramped up area. I've seen ponds that's heavily stocked, but fish grow.
Yeah.
And if they're all in a cigarette box together, and they can't move about, and there's no freedom or anything like that, and they're all close to each other, well, they're not going to grow. But you're changing water, and all those pollutants are out that water, and the fish will grow. And you think like feeding times. I put a video on one of my talks I do, and I say, "Are your fish thriving or surviving?" And that's the difference when you look at. I do this video and put my fish on. And there's fish like to 70 and 80 cm are climbing over each other trying to get the food. And people say, my fish don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, how much water are you changing?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you've got to change water. And you could be fortunate you're in an area or you've got a low stocking density. You don't have to change a lot of water. You're in a big pond and they'll eat.
What percentage do you change, Andy?
That's difficult because I run my pond different to everybody else. So I run systems on there where I'm changing water through RO. So I'm recirculating pond water through an RO system. So I was talking to Joe the other day. I got salt in my pond. I've had a terrible year with parasites. Been keeping koi 33 years. Parasites been bane of my life this year. So I've hardly run RO at all, only off the mains RO system I've got from my tap water because it's awful. And I got salt in my pond, and it was the first time in 33 years of koi keeping I've used salt. And I always sort of dismissed it, and it got to the tipping point was, I'm putting salt in my pond, that is it. It's going to 9%, I'm going to chuck it in. And the therapy, I'm not advocating using salt. This is what I had to go through. And I found it therapeutic to put 9.5 bags of salt in my pond. It was strange. And if salt went in, honestly, it was bizarre. And I'm thinking, well, I've got cod in my pond now and had it because fish aren't designed to live in salt. The fish look the best they've been for years. And I'm not advocating this, but I come back down to 0.6 and got down to 3, and my fish started flicking and flashing. And I was pulling my hair out. And I scraped my fish again, and I got baby flukes. And I thought, I was doing my head in. And I rung somebody up, a mate of mine who's, does fish health and all that. So, mate, I'm in my tether now. What'll I do? And I did something. I'm not saying what it was. And I got rid of the flukes. Touch wood. So I got rid of the flukes, but I got a background of salt in my pond. Salt's hard to get out of a pond. You've got to do massive water changes. Said to Joe, my salt level in my pond, the TDS was 1870. Was I talking to you, Joe? Tuesday?
Yeah.
1870. And I was just going to turn on this recycling unit. So I've run it 3 hours a day, every day. So today I'm at 700. It's probably down to 600 and something now.
Wow.
And it's dragging all that it's dragging that salt out of the pond. And when that salt's come out, it's removing ammonia and nitrite, phosphate, nitrate, everything. It's taking everything out of the pond. So I run my pond different to everybody else. So what I was doing, and I always say this to people, you can get a TDS pen. It's just a bit of a guidance, really, if you're changing enough water. TDS pen, obviously your tap water is your guide. So you test your tap water for TDS. And mine's 460. So if you're looking at your pond water, you're looking at 60 to 100 parts per million higher than your tap water, and that will be an acceptable level in your pond. Now, if it's like on my pond, if it's 460 in my tap and my pond's 460, obviously I'm changing massive amounts of water to dilute all the pollution out of the pond.
Yeah.
Because your fish are going to the toilet, you're putting food in there. It's just everything what's in the water. So everything that's not what's TDS is total dissolved solids. And H2O is pure water, zero.
Mm.
So everything what's in that water is not H2O, is what's added to the water. Metals, fish poo, whatever, urine, everything. All that makes up TDS.
Mm-hmm.
So that 60 parts to 100 parts per million is probably the best gauge of the lot.
So that's where I'm quite lucky. Our TDS down here is low, by the coast, south coast.
I said, if I give you some money and you put a pipeline to my house.
We've joked about this before.
2 pipelines, you send me yours and I'll send you mine back to you and see what you can do with it.
We joked when obviously Phil had an RO system built from you, didn't I? And when he was saying, obviously talking about the prices and things like that, I said to him, look, I'll just bottle 1,000 litres of water and I'll send it up to you every week. And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, TDS is really low, but equally, my phosphates are up and my KH is like 1 out of the tap. So you you play that, don't you?
Yeah, you're looking at buffering water, so you need KH to maintain pH because that's the buffer, and it's also the food for your filters as well.
Andy, is there a typically good level TDS for tap water?
Well, everybody's tap water is different. So looking around the country, there's people who's got tap water TDS of 90. They're in a soft water area. 90 to 100. Fantastic water. I'd run RO to try and mimic that sort of water. So that's the softest level. And the highest reading I've seen has been at 800 parts per million, which is like liquid concrete.
Yeah.
So I've just been talking, we've said about Japan, and these fish are living in 30 parts per million, and we're sticking them in a TDS of 800.
Yeah.
Where's the sense of that? They're thinking, I can't breathe, I'm choking. It's mad.
This
Absolutely
podcast is, for me, I don't want to go over my experience because I think people have already had that. In the past, we've done a discussion about it. But one of the things that I don't think I've mentioned is when you go to Japan and you see the fish in the condition they are in Japan, and then you bring them home and you watch them slowly deteriorate, that's the killer. It's not because you get them at your dealer's place and then you watch them it's what they look like in Japan. And until you've gone, I think it's really hard to understand because the skin luster is just so good. And I think even some koi dealers, will agree with me in this regard. Once you get them into the country and you quarantine them, and even after that 6-week period of quarantine or whatever they're doing, their routine, the skin just looks different. It has a different level to it. And so it's almost that search for perfection, and that's the problem. I think one of the things I want to touch on today, if we go back to the 3-stage dechlorinator that people might just go, they might be listening to this chat and they might just hop on Amazon and go, oh, look, there's a 50 quid 3-stage dechlorinator. Is that going to solve all my problems? What do you reckon, Andy?
Well, I've had customers ring me up and they've already bought the purifiers and all they want's information. And I've got this purifier. I bought it off Amazon. I bought it off eBay and I've been running it. And why is my fish looking so terrible? I say tested the water for chlorine. No. What flow rate are you using? 4 gallons a minute. Sorry, gallon a minute. Sorry. Gallon a minute. Really? Who's told you to do that? It's on the box. It's on the box. That's what it can do.
I know exactly what dechlorinator you're talking about when you say that as well.
And Mystic Meg, these people that's making these filters, and they say this filter will do 100,000 litres before you need to change the carbon blocks. Really? So Dave's and Simon, Joe and me are all in different areas and we've all got different chlorine levels. So how can Dave's water do 100,000 litres? Simon's can do 100,000 litres. Joe's and mine can do all do 100,000 litres. Impossible.
Do you think it's the same person who says my car does like 80 miles a gallon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wishful thinking. And
Statistics sell, don't they?
Okay, years ago, 3-stage purifiers, you could use a 10-inch 3-stage purifier and get away with it. We all started with that sort of thing years ago. But COVID came along, and my tap water was always very, very low in chlorine levels. And when you talk about milligrams a litre, it was 0.18 milligrams a litre. COVID came along, and it went to 0.64 milligrams a litre. A massive jump, and it's never, ever gone back to the level it was pre-COVID. Now it's 0.48, something like that. And then we look at 3-stage purifiers going back when chlorine levels was low, and now they're higher. You need something more. And you look at a 3-stage 10-inch purifier, the first stage of any three-stage purifier, or a big blue to that matter, is a sediment filter. It does do nothing for chlorine removal, just remove sediment from the water. And a 3-stage purifier, the next one would be a GAC filter, granular carbon, and a carbon block. At best, in a 10-inch, you're looking at probably a kilo of carbon.
Andy, can you just touch on the differences between the different carbons, like your GAC carbon, your catalytic carbon, and your bone char and stuff like that?
Yeah, when I first started doing this, I brought catalytic carbon to the market. It was already on the market, but not for koi keeping and not for putting in ponds. And you look at the three carbs basically, and another material I'm going to start testing now, and nobody knows about this, so this is all hush and everybody will be copying if it works. But GAC carbon, granulated activated carbon, most of the time the best stuff's coconut carbon. That's for removing chlorine. That's just basic chlorine levels. People have just got chlorine around the country and very low levels of metals and very low levels of chlorine, and not chloramine. Chloramine's made up of ammonia and chlorine. Well, I'll go on to that in a minute. But so the next one with the catalytic carbon, that deals with chlorine and chloramine. So that breaks the bond between the chloramine, which is ammonia and chlorine bonded together, splits the bond. It deals with the chlorine aspect, but it doesn't deal with the ammonia. And ammonia level is very, very low. And the filters in your pond should deal with that. And then there's bone char. Bone char is a very underrated carbon. I use it on my pond. It removes metals and chlorine. I don't think it removes chloramine. Some people say it does. I don't think it does. But any carbon, GAC carbon, or bone char for that matter, will deal with chloramine, but it'll ruin the carbon quicker.
Yeah.
So it just, they did a test in America, and it was Pentec, Penchlor, whatever they call them. And they did a test with a carbon block and put 100,000 gallons through this filter with a very minute amount of chlorine. And when it started passing chlorine, they did the same test with the same amount of chlorine, but added a microscopic amount of ammonia to that supply to make chloramine. Run the test again, obviously a brand new carbon block, and that carbon block failed at 30,000 gallons. So it's a third of the shelf life.
Yeah.
So you've got to have the appropriate carbon for whatever the conditions are. And I'm probably making it difficult, but it's not that difficult as long as you're running some sort of carbon. And if you want to get in touch with me and give me a postcard, I've done it for loads of people.
Did it for me 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, look at your water report. You can look at your water report, and when you look at water reports, you're looking for Anglian Water's probably one of the best. It's not, I won't say the best supply, but it's the best information for looking at levels. On the right-hand side of, when you put your postcode in, you'll get an address finder, and it'll tell you on a map, show you on a map, right-hand side, and it tells you about fluoride, chlorine, whatever in this report. Click on the chlorine, and it'll tell you whether you are using chlorine or chloramine in your area.
Andy, can I just ask you, when I look on my water report, my water supply is Severn Trent. Now, when I look on my water report for my area, it doesn't say anything in particular about chloramines, but as I understand it, it's chlorine's bound with ammonia to create chloramine. But it doesn't mention ammonia itself. It mentions ammonium.
Ammonium. Well, ammonium's, when you look at a koi pond, you're looking at NH3N is the toxic part of ammonia, and NH4 is the inert part of ammonia, the harmless part of ammonia. So that's what your filters are creating. It's going in at NH3N, coming out NH4. So that doesn't necessarily mean you've got chloramine. And if you look on your water report, you'll probably see you've got nitrite. And nitrite obviously is a byproduct of ammonia from filters and stuff. So it still doesn't mean you've got chloramine. And if you ring up a test to do on your tap water, you want to know whether you've got chloramine or not, and you've got an electronic test, like a Palin test, a Hannah pocket checker, whatever it may be. Not a drop test, not a tablet test. You need an electronic test. Test your tap water for ammonia. Might sound stupid. If you've got ammonia in your tap water, you've got chloramine.
Yeah, someone put up the other day, there was a video I saw where they were testing their tap water and they had ammonia.
Yeah.
Because you also mentioned, obviously, with chlorine as well, they can treat with UV also.
Yeah, I've got a video. You can look on YouTube. Look at water purification on YouTube. They use ozone. They use flocculants in the water to separate leaves and algae and all that sort of thing, and send water over a weir to get rid of the flocculants. So the flocculants can either float or sink. So when it floats, it goes over a weir and you get rid of all the particles out of the water. It'll go through ozone. It'll go through different stages. And one of the final stages some of these water companies using is carbon. And it goes through carbon beds. And then the last thing, they ought to have one for koi keepers. So when it's gone through the carbon bed, they ought to divert that to us as koi keepers before they put the chlorine in. And that'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
Problem solved. But no, they have chlorine then. And then it could be any sort of amount. The most I've come across in this country is 1.2 milligrams a litre. That's in tap water.
What's the legal limit?
There's no legal limit. Well, there is. And I was talking to Joe earlier. Go on a water report and look at chlorine. And the World Health Organization, I've got a photo of this. It's on my phone or it's on a computer. Look at chlorine levels, and the maximum amount that's allowed by WHO, the World Health Organization, if there's ever a problem, is 5 milligrams a litre. Now, if they put 5 milligrams a litre in that supply, wouldn't matter how many big blues you're running, it would go into your pond. You can't stop that sort of amount. And one customer of mine had that problem with chlorine going in his pond, and he had 100 kilos of carbon in 4 big blues, and chlorine went through all that. So without doing anything, that's why that's a horror story. Doesn't happen. That's only one isolated case. Wind it back. As long as you are using some water purification and you use it right, that's better than nothing.
The other things that are in the water, so a story that people might not have known, my wife actually suffers with rosacea, extremely sensitive skin. And my tap water is extremely hard out of the tap. The TDS is really, really high. The KH and GH are just astronomically high. And it was out of my discussions with Andy, I just kind of Googled rosacea hard water. And hard water can actually cause rosacea. And she never had this before we moved in, this rosacea. But she's got such sensitive skin that she actually comes out in like rashes. So she's had to buy a special cream just to deal with the rashes. It's unbelievable. Like, if I were to ask you guys, do you think that koi have sensitive skin? What would your answer be to that?
Yeah, I mean, it affects them, doesn't it? The mucus up we stuff inside the tap water.
Yeah, and like I know that's a dramatic, like, you know, I'm being a bit dramatic there and saying my wife's got sensitive skin. The fish have sensitive skin, you know, but that's one element Andy mentioned. I think it sums it up brilliantly. Are the fish surviving or are they thriving? Can they adapt to terrible water? I think yes, they can. They can live in it. But then we talk about, you know, persistent parasites, and I think that's going to become like this podcast is everything we discuss about on this podcast comes back
to that actually something that I wanted to ask Andy about.
Persistent parasites. How much of that is water related? I'll open the floor to that one.
That can be the problem, and the problem when you're looking at a different element now, and you're looking at metals, metals is an old different ball game, and I don't know why. And I've spoke to Joe and I spoke to different people. Why 20 years ago, probably 15 years ago, maybe less than that, nobody had problems with flukes.
Yeah.
You just treated with whatever you got, parasites gone. Now, I've had this year, and I say it's the worst time in my fish keeping career, really, that I got flukes. Then I got Costia. Then I got flukes. Then I got Costia. And it was just going backwards and forwards. It was driving me nuts. And I've used all sorts. I'm not saying what dose rates and what, because I have used some massive dose rates. And I don't advocate that, not at all. But so I got to salt, and after 33 years of treating fish and never had a problem, you get parasites and you put a treatment in it, and it sorts it. But why is it that these fish all of a sudden can't sort of exist with these parasites, or the parasites overwhelm the fish? And I think when you look at metals have got a different effect on fish, and it affects the immune system.
Yeah.
So, like us as human beings, Dave's perfect case has got man flu. Probably run down a little bit. He's been attacked by man flu. It's took over his life now, and he's suffered. Women don't suffer like this. I don't appreciate how bad it is for us men. But he's got man flu. Well, this is looking at koi, and you're looking at metals, and you're looking at aluminium and copper at 15 parts per billion are detrimental to koi. Zinc, iron, lead's 30 parts per billion. So this is detrimental to koi health. The problem is it affects the immune system. It causes lethargy in fish. And if your koi are run down or compromised the immune system, they're going to get everything. So cost you is always a secondary part to any treatment. They're an opportunist parasite, in my eyes anyway. So you'll get flukes. On the back of that, you get costed because they're run down. You just hit them with a treatment. They're already run down. They've got flukes. You've hit them with a treatment. Costia comes in, and that takes over. Treat for the costia, the flukes come back because the treatment you've used either isn't strong enough, or you've not treated for the right fluke. Obviously, gill flukes, skin flukes. So one's an egg layer, one's a live bearer. But you can go round and round in circles, and they've got people that's got the same sort of problem, and they can't get rid of it. Okay, they've talked about super flukes. And if you remember back, probably 3 or 4 years ago, a new product come on the market called LearnX Pro. Wasn't available in the UK. It came out of Holland. And everybody jumped on a bandwagon and ordered it from Holland. And the people who got flukes got rid of the parasite. Brilliant. Now, I went to a koi show in Holland a few years ago, and I think it was just post-COVID, and we was on the Takazumi stand. I was talking to this manager, and was talking about different things, and I turned around and said, what's all these on these treatments? So they're treatments for flukes and everything. Really? Not seeing them in the UK. So you won't do. They're banned.
No.
They're banned. So the chemicals, is it the VMC, the veterinary medical system, whatever it is, I don't know, won't allow them in the country. So you can take them in your hand luggage or take them in your suitcase, but if you get caught, you'll be in trouble.
Yeah.
So I wonder if the fluke treatment, what came out of Holland at the time, had got some treatment that was banned, and we was just buying it, and it was just brought straight into the country in a cardboard box, and we was using it, and it killed the flukes.
Yeah.
Now it's available in the UK. It doesn't seem to be as good as what it was. Well, I might be wrong.
Yeah. What they use in Japan, you can't buy over here. I think it's something to be I think from what I understand, you can actually use it to make cocaine or something. something. So it's like legal in Japan.
I want to be a koi.
Yeah. Yeah. Just well, maybe a bit of that in the koi pond might get rid of the flukes.
Yeah, it's an expensive way of doing it, though, isn't it?
Definitely.
But no, that you are right, and I think we've seen quite a change in terms of like there's been some advice from some really experienced people to start doing do a dose on day one, half dose day two, black, and these kinds of changes that even the manufacturers now are leaning towards because of some advice given by some people in the industry. So it's like people are trying everything, aren't they? I do wonder how much of it is to do with the water, though. I think we could use some information from some of the manufacturers of these fluke treatments and even some veterinarians to see if there's any way to like prepare the fish better. I mean, again, this is not like giving advice, but I've used some like pretty harsh things in my time. I've leaned on things that are not even meant for koi and meant for like pigs, and sheep, which I found to be quite extremely effective in comparison to some other things, and extremely cost effective in comparison as well. But there's so much legislation about using different chemicals, isn't there, that causes it to be a hassle.
My friend's a farmer, and where I work next door, they've got in the just trying to think what that is actually now. It's one of the big farming agricultural companies, and the amount of times I've been in there and I'm reading it, and I'll be reading a litre bottle, and I'll spot a word like something that I've seen in a koi treatment. But like you say, for pigs and things, the percentage is much higher. The farmers can legally use it under license, and it's a lot cheaper. So on the koi side, we're getting a diluted product that's more expensive.
Yeah.
If we want it to be powerful, we can't do it. We've got to get it from abroad. It does seem this is where that koi tax comes in, doesn't it? It does very much seem to be a koi tax.
It's a shame though, because it seems to be driving quite a lot of people away from the hobby because people aren't enjoying it anymore.
No. And if you, it's like going back. If you get a dog or a cat and you took it to the vet and they give it an injection or give it some tablets and it's okay, they wouldn't let it go on and on and on. You keep going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, spending all this money on all these treatments to make the cat better. We're putting treatments into our ponds, and you just wonder why they're not effective. It's bonkers, really, isn't it? Absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. I mean, once I got my water right, I was able to get rid of parasites. And one of the interesting things for me was that they all started spawning as soon as my water got good. It was like they all organised a celebratory orgy or something like that, and just they went off the rails. But to be honest, it kind of did feel like that same relief that I felt. I think the fish felt as well in some bizarre way.
I think I got to the stage, and it was this year, this is what triggered it for a start. So I was running the recycling RO, and I was putting tap water back in my pond as a buffer. So instead of using bicarb, because obviously pH water out of an RO system is 6.4. I say obvious, it is to me, but that's what it is. It's acidic. And I was using tap water as a buffer. And you've got, with the recycling system I was running, you've got to replace the wastewater. So tap water was the easiest way of doing it. Obviously, it's purified. And I think my troubles started, and then it exasperated from there. So I was putting tap water back into the pond, and I was noticing that fish were flicking and flashing. And I thought, that's strange. Tested for chlorine, tested all the normal tests, and I can't find anything. So just before I decided to stop using tap water altogether and just use RO, I bought a fish. And whether I brought that fish and I brought something in, that's when my trouble started. I'd got water in my pond which was irritating the fish for a start. And then I started treating. Well, I wasn't changing water because you can't change. There's no point in doing water change when you're treating. So it just rolled on and rolled on. And I think what happened with me, and it's probably my own fault, that treatments went in for flukes, then treatments went in for costia, and then treatments went back in for flukes. And it's just an overall thing. And all I'm doing is I'm treating the pond and I'm running the fish down. It's like me giving you a load of tablets and saying you need these, and all of a sudden you think, God, I'm wasted here. It's just
I think
too much.
I think that tends to be the case in a lot of hobbyist ponds, though. They just seem to end up in a vicious cycle.
Yeah. I think sometimes you've maybe got to take a step back, because obviously flukes aren't going to kill your fish. They might do some damage to the filaments, but when you're looking at killers of koi, you're looking first ones, the top one's white spot. Next to that is Chilinella and Costia. So if it's not those and it's Trichodina and flukes, you can probably take a step back a bit. Okay, they might be flickering and flashing and doing themselves a bit of damage, but you've got to sort of think, well, hold on a minute, I'm going to have to treat sometime. But if you get locked in that vicious circle and the treatments you're using aren't strong enough, or I don't know, they're being diluted out, or they're already diluted out, and the gestation period, this is one thing. A mate of mine wrote, he said to me, have you looked at the gestation period of flukes? So you look at white spot and you're probably treating on day 1, day 3, day 7, whatever. You're trying to catch that hatch out of the triumphants when there's an egg form. Now, flukes, you look at a packet of flukes, we're treating on day 1, day 3, day 5, whatever it may be. We get to day 7 and maybe day 14. Have we missed it? Because my mate said, if you're ever bored, have a look at flukes and look at the gestation period. Now, flukes in cattle can be 30 days gestation period.
Jesus.
So if a cow goes to the toilet and there's some flukes in that poo, and a bird stands in that poo and then comes to your pond and that goes into the water, would that be a different strain of fluke? I'm not sure. Sure.
It's definitely interesting. And it all depends on your water temperature as well, which is another complication, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got a friend up on Isle of Arran that's been having quite a lot of problems with flukes, haven't we?
Yeah. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Sam. Yeah, he's had, how many months has he had it for now? I feel sorry for him. And then because he's on the Isle of Arran, what's his temperature? 4.5 degrees at the moment. So he's now in that vicious cycle where actually he's just hoping that the winter kills the flukes off, because it's too cold to use treatments now. I really feel for Sam, bless him. And anyone else keeping koi on the Isle of Arran, because it cannot be easy.
No. The good thing he's got going for him is he has managed to get them down to quite low numbers. They are still there, but he has managed to lower the numbers quite a lot.
Yeah.
There's just there's no be all and end all with the fluke treatments, unfortunately. Whilst we're on the be all and end all, I wanted to mention, obviously there's a few new detox products that have kind of like really rose to prominence over the last year. Obviously, one of those is the new Complete Pond Detox, which I happen to use. I know Si and Dave have used it as well. I think it's a really good product. I wanted to have a chat with you about it because it's something that you stock, Andy, and how you think it is as a product, and I've got a couple of questions about that. But has it affected your way of, say, if somebody approaches you and thinks they've got a problem with the pond, do you just tell them to try this first, or what's kind of your routine with that?
Or is it a mask? You can say it, Joe. Does it mask a problem, or does it fix a problem?
Simon will remember this. I watched his podcast when he did the two together, and he was trialing it, and I put on there about chlorine. And at the time, I was selling other products as well. I wasn't selling a new product because it wasn't on the market. And I was given the product to try. And it was Frank that come round, and we did a few tests, and I said, mate, this is not real. I'll need to do some more testing. Seen Simon's testing, and I said, this, looks fairly good stuff. I'm one of those sort of people. I won't sell anything and not unless I tried it. So I thought, right, I'll test it myself. This is me being an idiot. Like you did the jugs, I did 100 litres of bloody water. And I'm measuring this out, and I thought, you stupid idiot, why am I measuring it? Oh, I'll carry on with it. So I got 100 litres in this bowl, and it was tap water. And I treated with a detox, but I must admit, I did a double dose because my tap water's, as I said, crap. And I went in the garage and I tested for chlorine. That was the first test I did. 0.48 milligrams a litre. There's a video online, and I couldn't believe it. It's 0. Bloody hell. First thing somebody said was, has it got sodium thiosulfate in it? So I'd done a copper test. I did a copper test. Copper test was high, come back 0. It's on the video. Well, I can't believe this. That was just one treatment. Okay, it's a double dose, but it got rid of it. Right, I'll test for iron. So I bought an iron test, and it cost me, can't remember how much it bloody cost me. And I tested my tap water for iron, and it was 0. I thought, what a waste of money that is. Anybody's got high iron in their water and wants it tested, send it to me, I'll test it for you, and I'll try this detox on it. But anyway, somebody said sodium thiosulfate is in the treatment. I said, I don't think it is, but I'll tell you what I'll do. While it's in the bowl, the treatment's in the bowl, I'm not actually treating the sodium, the chemical I'm going to put in a minute, which is PP. So if you've got PP in your pond and you put sodium thiosulfate in it, would neutralise it, turn brown, right? So the detox is already in the bowl, but it's been in there quite a while now. And whether it's neutralised itself because it's grabbed everything what was in that water, I don't know. So I put some PP in it, stayed in the bowl for 3 days. Now I think the other way around it, Simon, you've probably tested it for PP, is you put the right amount in it, will get rid of PP as well. But I'm impressed with it, and I was asked to stock it, and I said, yeah, mate, I'll stock that. But I would say, and we spoke about this before, Joe, it's brilliant stuff, don't get me wrong, great stuff. But we still need to look at the source water first. But if we've run out of ideas, and this is where it gets really difficult. So we can test for iron, we can test for copper, and if you're not using the right carbon in the first place, or the carbon's exhausted and it's passing copper and that, brilliant. You can put it in your pond, it's going to neutralise everything. Your fish are going to go back to normal. Great stuff. And I've had a customer, and I mentioned it earlier, that this customer has had problems, and he's put every different lotion and potion in his pond this year, and he can't get to the bottom of it. And he put the detox in, this no great detox.
Yeah.
And he rang me on Tuesday, and I said to him, how's it going on? And I think I put a detox advert on my Facebook page, and he put on the Game Changer. And I rung him. Well, no, he rung me up. I messaged him. He rung me up straight up, and he said, mate, I can't believe this. My fish have been suffering. Well, he said, problems with fish all year. And I've put this in overnight, lifted the covers up this morning, and these fish at 70 and 80 cm are scrambling for food. So obviously it's something you can't test in your water.
Yeah.
You can test for metals, you can test for this, that and the other. But I'm still convinced that water suppliers are putting something else in the water that they may be trialling to get rid of different things.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've said to people, because obviously people have asked me about it because the video what I put out on it. Yeah, and I'd been having a lot of issues in the pond with the fish having mucus heads, and I'd tried everything to get to the bottom on it. Obviously, been testing my water for quite some time, or your ammonia, nitrite, and all your usual tests. I tested for chlorine, no chlorine in the water. I'd been scraping and scraping over and over, thinking I was missing something. Why are they holding this mucus? And I couldn't fathom it out. And then once I'd started testing this stuff, and slowly as I'd been using it, a few weeks at a time, I slowly noticed the mucus head starting to get better and better as each week passed. And I can only put it down to this: there was something in the water what I couldn't test for. I couldn't get to the bottom of, and it's just, I don't know, it's just took it out somehow.
It's
we
really
don't know everything that's in the water supply, what affects koi really. We look, like you just mentioned, at all the things you test for, and which are regular tests, or you want to test for metals or whatever. But anything else, you need to look at a water report. You've looked at it, Simon. You've probably looked at it, Dave. You look down that water report and see everything that's in that water report. And mate, there's everything. Arsenic, boron,
two A4 pages. In a font 10, it's two A4 pages of what's in that water.
And all these things, bet one of those things probably detrimental to koi. And if it's in high volumes and we can't test for it, and we're testing a normal testing, and we can't remove it, and you use an RO system, like Joe's using an RO system, it will remove 99% of the contaminants out of that water supply. And you've seen a transformation in your fish. So obviously something that's been removed by the RO system is in that water that's irritating fish.
Yeah.
So you're using a detox now. Okay, you don't know what it is, but at least it's getting rid of what the problem is. Do you leave your fish, like you said, you've got mucus on a fish. Problem with mucus, the first line of defense on a fish is mucus. That's the protection layer to stop whatever is irritating the fish. Once they've got the mucus on it, so it takes a long time to get rid of mucus.
Yeah.
And then you're just seeing it gradual.
And if you have another problem, while you've got that mucus, it's then trying to treat that problem then, isn't it, with that amount of mucus on the fish.
Now we're going round in circles again now with the treating, as we've talked about.
But
it makes sense.